All right, well, welcome all. Thank you for bearing with us while we work through some last-minute technical problems there, but I think we've got everything set now. The link is out and available for anybody who joined remotely. My name is Brandon Buchanan. I'm the city manager here for the fine city of Woodinville. We are joined this evening. First of all, thank you all for coming out. This is obviously a very important issue for our community, and this is a great opportunity to learn more about what the county's working on here. We do have the King County Solid Waste Division's team here this evening, and this is really their opportunity to share what they're working on with the Northeast Recycling and Transfer Station that they're looking to site in the area. We'll hear from them, obviously, with the presentation here momentarily, but I just wanted, again, to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come out this evening. As we go through the program this evening, again, I mentioned there will be a presentation, and then, of course, opportunity to answer questions. Many questions have already been submitted, so I think we'll run through answers to those, both the city and the county teams, and then have an opportunity for any other questions that we have from the floor from remote. There will be, and I know the county team will talk about this evening, there will be an opportunity to submit your comments when they look at opening up, I believe, and they'll have to clarify some of this, opening up a comment period here in the next little bit for additional comments. They can speak further to that. And then, of course, before you go this evening, we also have opportunity to learn about other things that the city is working on. We have a couple big important plans also that if you have interest in time to stick around and talk to the city team, those include the housing action plan, the climate action plan, and our transportation plan that the city is all working on at the moment. So we do have quite a bit for this evening, and looking forward to learning more about the transfer station siting process. And that I'll turn it over to the team from King County.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening, inviting us to join your community meeting. My name is Pat McLaughlin. I serve as King County's Director of Solid Waste, and I'm joined with my team, and I'll let them introduce each of themselves individually, but we appreciate the opportunity to share information about this project and most importantly, engage with you to listen and hear about your interests, your concerns, and do our best to respond to those this evening. So thanks again for having us here this evening.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Mary O'Hara, and I am the project manager for the Northeast Recycling and Transfer Station project, and I'm with the Solid Waste Division.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kaylin Brady. I'm the community engagement lead for our division.
Hi everyone, I'm Annie Kolb-Nelson from King County Solid Waste Division, and I'm the communication manager, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Mary O'Hara. I am the project manager, and this is called the Northeast Recycling and Transfer Station project. We call it NERTS for short, so that's what we'll be calling it for the rest of the evening. So tonight we'll be giving you...
We can't hear. There's no audio to the people on the phone.
Can you hear us now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. So this evening I'm going to give an update on the NERTS project, and this is just as a high-level overview. First, we'll revisit the purpose of this project. Why are we building a new transfer station? Then walk through the State Environmental Policy Act and how that relates to the EIS. And then review the next steps and go over a high-level schedule, and then open it up for questions. All right, so just as a reminder of the purpose for this project, our current Houghton transfer station is one of our busiest stations, and it was built in the 1960s, and it's outlived its useful life. So unlike our modern stations, it's not enclosed, there aren't any high-tech odor or noise control systems, and the layout of the current station really limits our ability to provide additional recycling and garbage services. So currently in Northeast King County, it's underserved in terms of having access to a full suite of recycling and waste disposal services. The Houghton transfer station has been in service for about 60 years and can't be upgraded or expanded. And people have to drive to Shoreline or Factoria to access many of the services available at those modern stations. So we worked with our regional partners, cities within King County, including the City of Woodinville, to develop our 2019 Solid Waste Division Comprehensive Plan. And in that plan, we outlined the need for a new transfer station in the Northeast County. And a new station will come with a variety of benefits, including more services such as additional recycling, composting, and waste recovery. Some of the additional recycling services will include cardboard, scrap metal, clean wood, yard waste, mixed paper, glass, appliances, tires, mattresses, and so on. So, and with growth and development comes a greater demand for garbage and recycling services. And the purpose of the NERTS project is to make sure we're protecting public health and the environment by providing accessible, convenient disposal and recycling services to people who live or work nearby. So one of our goals, one of King County's goals, is to actually bring less garbage to our landfill. And just as some trivia, 70% of what goes to the landfill each day could be reused or recycled. And this new station will be an important part of achieving our goal to get these materials out of the landfill and back into our economy. Increasing recycling and reducing waste is a big part of reducing greenhouse gas emissions that drive climate change. So next, let's just go over the State Environmental Policy Act. It's also called SEPA. Before an agency like King County can begin the construction of a public facility, we first complete the SEPA process. SEPA stands for the State Environmental Policy Act, and it was enacted in the state of Washington in 1971, and it requires that we take a close look at the environmental impacts of a project. So this can be things that we traditionally think of as environment, like earth, air, water, and things that impact our living environment, like changes to traffic, utilities, or historical sites. The Environmental Impact Statement, or an EIS, is the formal document that looks at these impacts and provides alternatives or mitigation measures that would avoid or minimize those effects. So the first step in this process is called scoping. And our initial scoping period concluded in January of 2023. So during scoping, we invited the public, tribal governments, and other agencies to share their comments on the project and the scope of the EIS, including the probable significant environmental impacts and the mitigation measures that are being recommended to reduce those impacts. Our solid waste team held public meetings virtually and in person in Woodinville and in Kirkland. And there was also an online open house so that we were able to hear from as many people as possible. So recently, within the last week, we received new information about a planned development on a portion of the Houghton Park and Ride, which was one of the alternatives that we were studying in the EIS and through SEPA. And at King County, we've decided to remove the site as a candidate for further analysis from the EIS. The Houghton Park and Ride's current property owner is WashDOT, and they have plans for infrastructure improvements that will require about 25% of the northern portion of the Park and Ride. So even though WashDOT has planned to surplus means that they'll sell the rest of the parcel, the remaining available area will be too small to adequately accommodate a transfer station with the levels of service we need for the growing part of this area. So because of the change to our initial determination of significance and scoping notice, and we're going down to 2 alternatives, we'll be reissuing the scoping notice on Monday, March 20th, and we'll be holding an additional 21-day public comment period. So after this 21-day public comment period concludes, then the technical analysis through the environmental impact statement will continue. So once the draft is complete later this fall or later this year, the draft EIS will be shared with the public again for review and comment. The project team will invite public, tribal governments, and other agencies to share their comments on the draft EIS. And when the draft EIS review period is over, our solid waste team and our consulting team will look closely at any comments that have been shared on the draft and begin to prepare the final EIS. And the final EIS will include responses to all of the comments and sometimes additional analysis or modeling to help understand possible impacts. So this final EIS, along with other relevant materials and considerations, will be used by us at the county to make the decisions regarding the project. So next is, we'll go through our action alternatives. So what is an action alternative? An action alternative is an option for the project that we analyzed during the EIS. So it's an alternative that we're taking action, so we're doing something. So for NERTS, now that we remove the Houghton Park and Ride, we are down to 2 action alternatives. The first action alternative is the existing Houghton transfer station and closed landfill. And out of this alternative, we have 2 sub-alternates. So alternative 1A assumes that we close and demolish the existing station as part of the construction of a new transfer station. And alternative 1B assumes that we leave the station open and operational while we build the construction of a new transfer station. So while we go through and we look at the action alternatives and the no action alternative, so a no action alternative means we don't change anything. Some of the things that we're going to be looking at through the technical analysis are traffic, water resources, cultural resources, and archaeology, air, noise. We'll do a visual analysis, fish and wildlife, hazardous materials. So there's a whole series of technical evaluations that will go into these different alternatives. So action alternative 2 is a series of 6 parcels located here in Woodinville in the Valley Industrial area. And then the no action alternative is just that. It's what happens if nothing changes. So we'll do a technical analysis for each alternative and then compare that against the no action alternative so that we can see any impacts that would be associated with the construction of the NERTS project. So what's next? Starting on Monday, March 20th, we'll be issuing the revised scoping notice that notes that we have removed the Houghton Park and Ride as one of the alternatives that we're going to be studying. That scoping period will be open for 21 days, and it will conclude on April 10th. We will have our online open house open and available again, so anybody can submit formal comments during that period. Once the scoping period concludes, then we'll move on with the EIS technical analysis. So taking into account any new comments that we receive during the 21-day period, we'll make sure to incorporate that into the technical analysis. And then we'll build our draft EIS and issue that for public comment and review late in 2023, so later this year. We plan to publish the final EIS in the spring of 2024. We'll make our final decision where the location of NERTS will be in the summer of 2024, and then plan to start design on the new station in fall of 2024. Construction will be 2027, and we plan to open the station in 2029. So that concludes our formal presentation, and now we can move to question and answers.
I can jump in. I think we had again, solicited questions before this meeting. We had quite a number of those come in. We've grouped them kind of into some that the city, I think, are probably most appropriate for the city to answer, and then some that are probably appropriate for the county to answer. That probably being the lion's share of the questions that we received. But just a couple questions, again, that were more focused on a city response. Kind of summarized, the question was, what actions are being taken by the city to prevent Woodinville from being selected as the new host for the NERTS facility? The response is, we of course have been quite active in communication for quite a long time with our counterparts at King County. Beginning years ago with the solid waste comp plan, where the need for NERTS was first identified. Since then, the City Council has been quite active with formal action and informal action, ranging from various opposition letters from the city stating our concerns with the site, all the way to networking with their elected counterparts at the county level. We have participated formally in the process in various ways, including participating, our council members and community members have participated in the siting advisory group, which was a formal group that the county put together to help advise on this process, as well as staff participation at core cities meetings and communication subcommittees. Of course, this meeting is a good example of how we're making sure the community is informed about what's going on as well. And we've helped notice previous engagement opportunities throughout this EIS siting process. At the same time, and we can certainly answer questions on this, the city is endeavoring to perform its own analysis of what we believe impacts to our community would be economic and transportation specific areas of focus. That kind of leads into the next question, I think, for the city is what sort of traffic, economic, future development, et cetera, impacts can residents, businesses, and visitors expect to see after the station is fully functioning? And obviously, that's a conversation that the county can help answer what those impacts are. But we do know that those impacts would likely be substantial to the city, and it's part of why we've been so concerned about this process. And to that end, that's why we're conducting that analysis at the city's expense and effort to analyze what we expect traffic and economic impacts to be. Of course, and I know the county is committed to wherever that site is located. If Woodinville is selected, it would be our expectation that the impacts would be fully mitigated. And finally, can you provide more details on the locations that are being considered? And that, again, I think is one that the county is certainly, they've shared some information in this presentation, and certainly can answer more questions than I can on this. So with that, I'll turn it over to the county, who I believe has some of the pre-questions that we had submitted, and then we can turn it to questions from the floor from the public remotely.
All right, the first question is, why do we think Woodinville is the best place? So we think Woodinville is a pretty charming community, but we actually haven't decided that it's the best place to site our recycling and transfer station. It is part of the regional area that is intended to be served by the station, and certainly our preliminary analysis has led us to the 6 parcels that are being considered. But this EIS process that Mary mentioned is really going to help inform at a more technical level, particularly at an environmental perspective, what the probable significant impacts would be if we were to develop here. And that's going to help us determine whether or not Woodinville is the best location, right? It's one lens. The environmental lens is a very important one. It's really core to our mission as a solid waste regional system. The environment's very important to us. There are also financial dynamics that we look at, socioeconomic dynamics, et cetera. But we haven't established that it's the best location, but we have identified it as being amongst the I guess the most appropriate locations to further consider and study. And as our schedule lays out, there's a lot of work ahead of us to really understand what those different elements and impacts are. And the scoping process that so many of you participated in is going to help ensure that we study those things that are most important to this community. And again, that will help us decide if that's really the best place. You want me to just keep going down the list here?
Sure.
Okay.
First couple, and then I can.
All right. Why build the transfer station in Woodinville and at that site? It will impact the city and the surrounding area in a very negative way. And we're certainly conscious of the community's concerns as it's been expressed. You clearly have an incredible tourism industry here. I know it's very important to your community, and you have lovely neighborhoods and various sorts of charm that go throughout the city. All the impacts are meant to try and be understood. These are difficult facilities to site. Everybody likes to use them, and right? And I'm proud to say that our customers give very high ratings to their experience and their access to services. So people like these. They recognize, you probably recognize the importance of having an essential public facility. I also understand, the resistance to say, but not here, right? So, but we do want to understand those negative impacts, and your city manager appropriately pointed out that one of our responsibilities in siting, when we do make a final decision, whether it's here in the City of Woodinville or in the City of Kirkland, assuming that there's an action alternative chosen, part of our responsibility is to mitigate those impacts. So we don't just study them and then move ahead. We have to study them and find ways to mitigate them in meaningful and effective ways. And that takes a lot of different shapes and form, and is also informed by the community as we move forward. Why must the Houghton site close? It was built in the 60s. It has outlived its useful life. We have extended its life as best as we can. We actually had to raise the roof, just as an example, because since the 60s, the transfer vehicles, the collection vehicles, your own vehicles have gotten a lot larger, right? And we couldn't actually allow the garbage haulers to tip their loads because they would hit the roof, right? So, but beyond that, and as Mary had mentioned, that station does not have the same sort of modern features, whether they're environmental, to control noise and odor and dust, and just being enclosed in general, being able to handle on-site queuing for increased traffic, and to offer the region more adequate recycling services. Because the other thing that is really clear from this community and from others who use this Northeast station is recycling is really important, and having access to those services are restricted right now at Houghton. So Houghton is not serving the existing community very well, and this is the fastest growing part of the county. So it's only going to become more constrained, and that's why it needs to be replaced. I'm going to keep going until they just kind of yank this from me here. What is the difference and the relationship between the Cascade Recycling Center owned by Waste Management and this proposed facility? Well, there's certainly a relationship to the regional system. We partner with Waste Management and Recology and Republic and Waste Connections in the collection. So they do the collection. They bring what they bring from your curbside comes to these regional transfer stations. That allows them to be efficient and go back out into your neighborhoods to collect the waste. The recycling that they collect, they don't bring to us. They take, in this case, Waste Management takes that to their own Cascade Recycling Center, and they do sortation and recovery of those and diversion of those recyclables. So, there's a relationship in that we're partners, if you will, but it is their own separate enterprise. Nonetheless, one of the things that your city has impressed upon us, and I think it's been really appropriate, is that as we make these siting decisions, we need to consider the totality of infrastructure that your city is hosting already, particularly relative to our regional solid waste system. And the fact that the Cascade Recycling Center is here, even though it's not a county facility, we recognize it's part of our solution, all right? And that is certainly something that we intend to consider as we go through this process. I'm going to give you a chance to hit a few of these while I take a drink of water. Plus, this one's really long, but you could pass it back at any time.
Okay, so daily from 7:30 a.m. and continuing until early evening, exiting 522 to Woodinville is already frustrating. Unsafe bottleneck of vehicles. Cars sit immobile through 2 stoplights to turn right onto Northeast 175th Street and then left to Redmond-Woodinville Road Northeast. It would be impossible to add a parade of waste management trucks to this current traffic disaster. Did anyone from King County or Waste Management drive this route at various times throughout the day to see how horrendous this traffic route already is? And what route will transfer station vehicles take to and from the highway? So this is one of the things that we're studying in the EIS. So one of the technical memorandums that we're working on in the EIS is a transportation study. So we are looking at the intersections that are north of the alternative and south of the alternative. And if anybody has seen those ropes that go across the road as you drive across, those are traffic counters. So at all of the key intersections and roads, we're doing traffic counts so that we can get an idea of what the existing traffic already is. And then once we know what it is now, we can look and see with our added traffic, you know, there's lots of development going around in this area as well. Plus looking at, you know, regional comprehensive transportation plans, like what are the mitigation solutions that we could put in? You know, would it be adding extra lights, adding other turn lanes? Those are new. We haven't gotten that far. I don't know if those are some of the mitigation options that we've been looking at, but this is part of the thing that we're studying in the EIS, and it's also why the scoping period was so important, so that we could get comments like this and understand, okay, so what is traffic like at 7:30 a.m. when you're trying to exit 522? So, you want to do another one, or you want me to keep going?
At your pleasure. And we need to identify ourselves as we, yeah.
I'm Mary O'Hara. I'm the project manager for the NERTS project. So. You said comments till the end? Actually, live questions. Yeah, so we have a list of questions that were submitted previously that the city staff sent to us. So we're just going through those first, and then I think people are allowed to get up and ask live questions. Yes, so once we get through the list that the city has already sent us, then yes, you can ask live questions. You're welcome. Is King County really not going to consider the dynamic impacts for the gem town of Woodinville? So again, this is one of the things that we're looking at in the environmental impacts study. So impacts to the built environment will be considered in the EIS, and the recycling and transfer station is an essential public facility, and essential public facilities need to be located within the communities that they're serving. They can be built to fit the community with sustainable design features, odor and dust control, attractive architecture, parks, classroom style meeting spaces. You know, like the Brightwater facility, that's a education space that can also do tours and hold weddings and other events. So the alternative that's located in Woodinville is located in the Valley Industrial District. And we would look at all of the, you know, we would look at the architecture in that area and see how we could make it fit in with the community it's located in. So. Why here? How are you going to deal with the...
Excuse me, Mary and Pat. So I just reviewed the questions. It looks like a lot of them were covered in the presentation. A lot of them you think you've already touched on. So maybe we can transition to hearing from some of the people in the audience. Yeah, I just so, you know, for the sake of time. And then for those of you online, if you could input your comments in the chat feature, we will try to, your questions in the chat feature, we'll try to address them in turn. And hopefully we can get everything addressed. I don't want to...
We'll provide these written responses to the questions that you can then share.
Excellent. So I don't think everybody heard that, but Pat from the county just said that he would provide written responses. So we will put those out to the distribution list. We'll also put those on our website so that everybody can access them. Do we have a sign-up list for... Okay, so I think Alana from the city is going to help. All right, so first up, Michelle Evans. Would you please, thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle Evans. I am a business owner and a homeowner here in Woodinville. And one of the questions I have for you, I know you're doing the SEPA study, but as you take a look at the costs of purchasing this land, of closing down 6 businesses, of impacting over 1,000 homeowners and residents there. How are you going to mitigate that, and how are you going to justify that cost when you already own the land in Kirkland?
Give me the easy ones. So that's actually a really important question and one that we have to answer. So, I mentioned how important the environmental aspects are of this decision, and they are, but financial stewardship is also a responsibility, and we do own land presently, and to develop...
That doesn't have businesses on it, so you wouldn't be closing down businesses.
Absolutely, right? And in fact, if we did displace businesses as a result of siting here in Woodinville, that does add additional costs, because we would assume a responsibility to help relocate those businesses. So there's additional responsibility that comes with that. All of that, the cost of acquisition, the impacts that are put onto those businesses, have to be factored in to the financial lens. And so it is considered. We don't fully understand those numbers as it stands today, but we recognize that before we can make a decision, those also have to be accounted for.
Okay, because just to be clear, those costs would be passed on to us, the taxpayers, correct?
Expenses, maybe you can clarify which costs?
So the costs of purchasing the land, of taking care of the displaced businesses and those employees who lost their jobs, that would be passed on to us in terms of costs of getting the center up and running.
So any costs that we incur, we do have to recover through the rates that we charge, and those rates are borne by those coming across the scales.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, next we have, and this is, by the way, this is Kevin O'Neill with the city. Yes. Okay, yes, actually there's a little bit more to that question that King County is going to add.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add a clarification about purchasing property that has existing uses on it, particularly businesses. So King County would assist those businesses in relocation, and we would also negotiate with them on a fair market price for their property as well. So the goal would not be to put people out of work at all. It would be to find a new location for those businesses. But again, that is a cost to factor in, and there's going to be a lot of things that factor into the ultimate decision on which site is the most suitable for the transfer station, and cost is going to be one of those.
All right, Kevin from the city again. Next, we're going to have Kimberly Ellertson. Kimberly, can you please step up to the microphone?
Hello, Kimberly Ellertson. I am a resident of Woodinville up on the West Ridge. I'm also the executive director of the Woodinville Chamber. Over these past few years, you've heard from our chamber a number of times with statements, letters that we've gathered from local businesses, so I won't go into all of that again. I did have a few questions. Michelle actually asked one of those. The chamber, our mission is to promote and strengthen business, so hearing about the displacement of 6 businesses it's a big impact. We are a small community. The other question I had was in regard to the other businesses that wouldn't necessarily be displaced, but that are along that West Valley area. There's both tourism-related businesses whose business will be negatively impacted through the traffic, the tourism ambiance, the change to that valley. So those tourism-related impacts. And then there's also businesses associated with children. There's a school across the street. There is a gymnastics facility that has over 1,000 gymnasts. There is a, I can't think of the name, but another type of ninja business just across the street as well. So I guess my question is, are these businesses in the area taken into consideration during this process? And along the lines, when you're mitigating impact, what are some ways that you mitigate negative impact to businesses in the area in terms of tourism, children facilities, et cetera?
I'll start and let my team join in.
Sorry, can you guys just identify yourself
Yes, thank you. Pat McLaughlin, I serve as the Director of the Solid Waste Division for King County. In terms of mitigating impacts to local businesses, and I'm going to distinguish that from those businesses that would be directly displaced. Because as Annie pointed out, the businesses that are directly displaced are treated with a different level of support and financially and otherwise. But in terms of the mitigation beyond that, it's really more limited to, I would say, the environmental impacts, which is traffic, right? I suppose it could cascade into operational or design impacts as well. If there were things to be considered, if you haven't seen, for instance, the North Transfer Station in Seattle, it sits right in the middle of a residential neighborhood. But you wouldn't necessarily know it. You could literally almost not see it the way it's kind of blended in to that neighborhood. And so I think there are design considerations, operational considerations as well. But there would not be, just to be clear, there would not be, financial mitigation to a business per se. What we would do is look at, the traffic impacts, the wildlife impacts, and we would be responsible to mitigate those types of impacts.
I think that was my question. How do you mitigate traffic impacts?
It could take a lot of different forms. It could be, as simple as traffic lights. It could be In some instances, that's very helpful. I'll use an example for our South County transfer station in Algona. We are straightening a part of the road, and this was really addressing a concern around a hazard. And so by straightening the road, making it a bit safer, also in that case, there was a desire to have some, the city did want some traffic lights to help as well. So it really can take a lot of different forms, and it's really dependent on those actual needs that get informed through this process.
And I do have one more business-related question. When you look at other cities that host these sites, I know you talked about our waste management Cascade facility. We are a small community. We also host 3 DTG recycle facilities, a Schnitzer steel facility. Are those taken into consideration in terms of the size of our city with those 5 recycle waste management stations versus other cities that must be maybe much larger and have fewer facilities? Or is that not part of the decision?
There isn't a formula, but we are conscious, and we do factor that in to our considerations as we're kind of evaluating the overall decision.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So for the for those online, there was a question about could widening the road be part of the mitigation, and the answer is potentially. So I'm going to switch it up and go to a question that we received online. The question from Deborah is, how can you guarantee that there will be no leaking into the water table, into the very nearby slough, and hence the Puget Sound?
I'm Annie Kolb-Nelson, and I have an answer to that question. So King County solid waste facilities are regulated by industrial waste pretreatment program, and so part of the design of the facility would be to comply with stormwater control permits and other permits that would regulate water quality, and including any kind of discharge or stormwater containment to control pollution. And, that's part of the reason why we build these facilities, is to control pollution and protect the environment. And that also extends to how these facilities are engineered and designed.
This is Mary O'Hara with King County. Just to add on to that, there's two different types of discharge that can happen. One is stormwater, which happens when it rains, which it does a lot in this area. And then the second is industrial discharge, so leachate, maybe oils from trucks, anything like that. And those type of liquids aren't released into the stormwater system. So we work with the regulatory agencies, and those go through a wastewater type permitting, so it's kept separate from stormwater, but those type of discharges are contained or treated in a way that our regulatory agencies dictate. So just want to make sure that everybody's clear that if leachate or oil or something discharges, it's not released into streams or into groundwater.
Excellent. Next, we're going to go to Kim Harris.
Hi, my name is Kim Harris. I'm a business owner here in Woodinville. My husband and I own a winery and a tasting room here. Obviously, Woodinville is sort of the mecca in Western Washington for wine tasting. Wine tasting and garbage don't really mix. So my question is, one, how, obviously traffic's a huge issue. How are we going to get the tourists, the locals, people from Seattle off of the freeway, for which there's one exit downtown, into our tasting room locations if the roads are clogged? I don't know how you expect people to get off the freeway if you're estimating, I read in one of the studies, like 55 trucks an hour to the facility. I don't know that we can actually handle that type of traffic and still get tourists off the freeway and into the city to spend money. The winery industry here in Woodinville, I think we contribute a little over $200 million to King County in taxable revenue. You guys are going to lose that if we can't get customers to our business. So I'd like you to consider that impact on all of the local businesses, because we won't have customers if they can't get off the freeway. Another thing, again, I just want to make the point, nobody really wants to go wine tasting when the garbage trucks keep wandering by. Not great. Thank you.
All right. Next we have Mary Peterson. I also want to take just a minute to say, we have a very long list of people who would like to ask questions, so if we could try to keep our questions as succinct as possible so we can make sure we have time for everybody, we'd greatly appreciate that. So Mary Peterson, are you still here? Okay.
Hi, I'm Mary Peterson. You're going to hear a lot of questions about traffic. I'd like to some statistics. I just heard a number saying 55 trucks an hour, which surprised me. I'd like to know, what is the statistic currently at Houghton? What do you project if you build this place here? And have you considered, I know you're doing this road study, but we already have a lot of development happening now, which is going to be even more traffic.
Hi, Mary O'Hara with King County. I don't know the statistics off the top of my head. I'm happy to provide those to you, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. And you're right, with all of the development that's going on in the Northeast King County area and specifically in Woodinville, any new development's going to add traffic. So that's one of the things that we're looking at in our traffic study. That work's ongoing, and after our scoping period ends on April 10th, we'll be able to complete that work. And then we'll have a lot more details around what is traffic going to look like in 2040 as a result of this, as a result of the NERTS project.
Is the community going to have any say when you're done with your study?
This is Mary with Solid Waste again. So what we're doing with all of the technical analysis is we'll bundle that all into the draft EIS, the draft environmental impact statement. And then when we issue that later this year, we'll have another public comment period where you'll get to review all of the technical analysis we've done and provide your feedback to it.
Hi, this is Annie again. One of the things to also consider is that when a location is selected and we begin to apply for permits, that a lot of the permits that we will be applying for also entail public comment periods. And for example, truck routes and hauling hours, all of that is determined by the host city. So we would be negotiating with whatever city ultimately hosts the facility, and people would have a chance to weigh in and comment on that.
All right, great. So next I'm going to go to another online question. I believe this may have already been answered, or this statistic wasn't available, but we'll try again just in case. What is the estimated amount of garbage coming into the new site?
Yeah, no, I don't have any numbers with me that I can provide, but we can certainly email those and post along with the remaining questions that we had prepared in advance.
Okay.
I think another important point too is that we're currently working on a program called RePlus, and as Mary pointed out in her presentation, 70% of what goes to the landfill every day does not belong there. It's not garbage. And so we're going to be working with end markets to find reuse opportunities for them. We're going to work to reduce waste. And our whole idea is to get less garbage to the landfill.
Okay, next.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So if there is an end-use product that is not being taken care of, not
Yes.
being recycled or whatever, or it's being recycled and then needs to leave that station, what trucks are those?
We estimate, actually, our goal is to reduce the amount of tonnage that even goes to the transfer station. It doesn't need to go to the transfer station. 70% of the tonnage that comes into our system shouldn't come into our system. It should go to Cascade Recycling Center. It should go to other C&D, construction demolition recycling markets, and new markets that need to be created. So when we talk about the opportunity to reduce the amount of tonnage going to the landfill, it reduces the amount of tonnage going to the transfer stations. And so it very easily, in terms of what kind of impact, could reduce it by a third, maybe as much as a half. It's substantial.
All right, before we move on to the next person, I just want to remind everybody, I know we all have pressing questions, but if we can wait until our name's called and come up to the microphone, the reason being the people online can't hear unless you're talking into the microphone. So we just want to make sure everybody gets the same information. So next up I have Troy Anderson. And while Troy's walking up, if you didn't sign up, I believe we have another list that I'll move to when I finish this list. So we want to make sure everybody has an opportunity. Mr. Anderson.
Hey, Troy Anderson. I sat on the NERTS advisory committee during the siting process. And just my question is, how many transfer stations currently are in tourist overlays? Tourist overlays in the community.
I don't suspect any of them are in a tourist overlay community. There are some that are in areas that I think you call this the industrial valley, is this particular area. So we have transfer stations that are located in similar industrial areas.
Follow up to that is driving around the county. You mentioned North Seattle area, and then the Kent station, and then even I think the Bow Lake station. They're right by the highway. They're just right off the highway. So during the siting process, I just feel it was flawed that we cited a place that's so far off the highway. Have you considered other sites? Removing the one park and ride site, going back to the process?
This is Mary with King County. So we're not going to go back to the siting process, but one of the things that was in our GIS criteria, so we had pass-fail criteria, and then we had GIS filters, and one of that was proximity to truck routes. So we filtered out any potential properties that were more than a mile or two away from a truck route.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your service on the Siting Advisory Committee as well.
All right, next up, I apologize. I don't think I know how to pronounce the first name, but the last name is Song, looks like.
Hi, my name is Xiaoling Song. So my first question is there going to be a socioeconomic analysis done in conjunction with the environmental impact? And if so, what's the weight, environmental versus the socioeconomic analysis?
This is Mary O'Hara with King County. Yes, we're also doing an economic analysis. That analysis is independent from the EIS, so it's an analysis that we're doing, but it's not part of the EIS. As far as the weight, Pat, I'll defer to you, but I think we're equally weighting the different.
There's not a weight, really. It's one of the factors, just like we have to weigh the financial, the environmental, the economic impacts is simply a factor we have to consider. Similar to, as I had mentioned earlier, how the community is currently servicing or supporting the regional solid waste system is something we think is important to factor in. But there's not a formula to say that it weighs as much or more or less than the others. I think we want to see what we learn through that study and make sure that we're being responsive to that and being able to demonstrate, again, the mitigation where appropriate to address any of those sorts of impacts.
So when is the socioeconomic analysis will be done, and will the result be published same way as the environmental analysis?
This is Mary with King County. So the socioeconomic analysis, because it's not part of the environmental or the SEPA process, we won't publish it for a public comment period. When we finish the report, we'll publish it on our website so that everybody can take a look at it. But it follows a different process than the environmental process, so there isn't an opportunity for public comment to review a draft like there is for the draft EIS.
And what is the timeline for finish that?
That will probably be this summer.
Summer, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next is a comment, not a question. So I have attended several of the previous meetings and learned that the current Woodinville site was actually not in the initial 7+ sites. And I was at the meeting when one of the siting advisory member, who is a Kirkland resident, who is strongly opposed the site in both sites in Kirkland, and proposed this site. And I have to say that I've been dismayed that this site can just come out of the blue from the process. And that points to a kind of, anyways, I just want to say that I'm dismayed about this process.
This is Kaylin Brady with King County. I just wanted to mention that a lot of you had questions about the timing of different documents and when they're released and then when they'll be available for public review. There's a couple different ways that we are sharing those out with the public, but the easiest way to stay informed as soon as those new documents become available is if you sign up for our alerts on our website. That's kingcounty.gov/northeast. And there's a newsletter anytime there's new information that's relevant to the project or that's shared out. If you sign up for that, it'll go straight to your inbox. It's the quickest way to stay on top of new information.
All right, next up we have Sarah Arndt.
Hi, I'm a community member and a resident within a half mile of the proposed site here in Woodinville. Several of my questions have been brought up already, so I'll just kind of pare it down. But when you announced that you were dropping the second Kirkland site, you said that you were just hearing about this last week. And I'm questioning that because I myself have been aware of that for nearly a month, that might be a possibility. So first, when did you first suspect that site might not be viable? So that's my first question. And then the second question relates to the scoping that you are the additional comment period for the EIS scoping that you are opening up. What is the purpose of that comment period? Are you looking to expand what you will examine in the AIS? Are you actually going to invest more heavily in the two sites in terms of what you will be looking at? I know we've already learned that the socioeconomic aspects are not going to be part of that scoping. So what else are you going to add? What else will come out of that scoping period, or excuse me, the comment period on scoping?
This is Mary with King County. I'll speak to the second part. So anytime there's a change so back on November 3rd, we issued what was called a determination of significance and scoping notice, letting everybody know that we would be studying 3 different alternatives and a no action alternative. Anytime there's a major change to a scope, if we're adding an alternative, taking away an alternative, an additional scoping period is an opportunity for you and other public agencies or tribal agencies to submit any additional comments that you think would be valuable for us to look at in the EIS. The SEPA has a pretty legally structured guideline about what we study and what we don't study. So if you look up the actual state regulation, it's, the socioeconomic analysis isn't one of the things that's required to study, but we're choosing to study it anyways and using it as part of the information that goes into the decision process. But we wanted to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to submit additional formal comments about any additional analysis items or anything like that, since we changed from 3 alternatives to 2 alternatives.
So you're not going to consider comments or questions that are outside of that official SEPA process as they come in. You're not going to expand the type of comment that you're listening to in this process. You're simply expanding the time that people have to submit them. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so. So you're welcome to send us comments at any time, or questions at any time. The formal comment period that's when it's a formal period where you can submit things that then we have to respond to, whether it's through the EIS, or that's actually how we respond to the comments, is by documenting it into the EIS.
Thank you. I'm asking these questions and drilling down here because I know at several of the public meetings over the last few months, there's been a lot of feedback about people feeling that as they were asking questions that were outside of the scope of the EIS, that they were being dismissed by the county because they were outside of that official process. So this is why I'm asking to find out what exactly the weight of these comments will be. Will they expand the scope, or is it just simply a period for people to submit more comments? So, thank you.
Ma'am, I'd like to address the first part of your question as well. You can sit down. I mean, if you'd like, whatever you like. This is again Pat from the Solid Waste Division. You had asked about when did we learn of the Washington State Department of Transportation, WashDOT. When did we learn of their planned development of the Houghton Park and Ride? And without looking it up specifically, I'm giving you general terms, but it was the second half of February that we learned that, and we learned it actually not from WashDOT. We learned it in dialogue with the city of Kirkland. We had already heard that WashDOT had oscillated on their plans to sell the property. At one point, they were in active discussions with the city of Kirkland. And then we learned in, I think it was early February, Kirkland said that they called it off and they're not going to sell it at all. And then it was back on for sale. We weren't actively engaging with the state at that time, but in the second half of February, we heard that there was this redevelopment associated with the property. So then I directly engaged with the state of Washington and asked for clarity over what exactly is involved, and received the kind of the maps and plans and what the impacts would be, and we, as quickly as we could, conducted an analysis of to how that would impact this particular project. But all of that happened very, very quickly in the second half of February. So it really was, as we had stated, very much news to us, because we had not prior really been engaging with the state directly. So the city of Kirkland probably was less surprised, right, because of their direct dialogues, but we only learned of it a few weeks ago.
All right, next we have Mike Millman.
Hi, thank you. I'm Mike Millman, longtime resident. I lived in Woodinville for 31 years. I'm also the mayor of Woodinville, and I wanted to thank you for coming to this process and taking your time. Thank staff for being here. Also, all the business owners, residents, and community that's engaged. Thank you. Your engagement's important and appreciated. I had a real quick statement. I know we have a lot to get through, but I wanted to assure everybody that we have been engaged with King County through this process. We've had several meetings. One of the first things I did last year was I took our King County rep, Councilmember Sarah Perry, on a tour of Woodinville and showed her our wonderful town, our tourism. I took her past the waste management site and showed her that we are doing our part regionally for solid waste. And then I showed her our tourist and what we're developing. And then I showed her some of the failed intersections well off 405 and really highlighted, and she was a really active listener, and that was really appreciated. And I think the picture was worth 1,000 words in this instance. One question, a lot of my questions were answered. One question I do have is, in your analysis, both environmental and economic, one of the things that puzzles me and concerns me is that we have an existing site that's really close to some of the larger population centers of King County. It's close to Bellevue, Kirkland, Redmond, which are 10 times bigger than the population of Woodinville. And by moving it to almost the furthest north in King County that you could, you're incurring lots of trips well off 405 through our failed intersections, which is an economic hit on not only on the city, but on the people who are bringing the solid waste to the facility, and then the trucks that then have to take that, instead of leaving from Kirkland, going to the furthest away from the population centers, going to Woodinville, then not only have to then turn around and truck it all the way down to Renton. So there is a certain economic impact to that, and my question is that being considered? And also there is a significant environmental impact to just that added move away from a lot of the population centers. So are those impacts going to be included in the analysis, whether it's on the environmental and or the economic side? And then my last question is why, it's my understanding, and I don't know this to be a fact, but it's my understanding that Kirkland has known about this process for the park and ride for some time, and there are other sites that have been scored that scored higher than our site. And that's my last question, is why haven't one of those sites that scored higher been included in any of the siting and replacing the park and ride that has been now excluded? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the engagement that you've personally provided, as well as alongside the staff and additional electeds within your city. You covered a lot there, so I'll do my best here to capture all of that. In terms of the impacts associated with the proximity of the station, certainly that is considered. We do recognize, and we've looked at the centroid of the service area, and how does this location versus the locations in Kirkland compare from the centroid. And so that's certainly something that is considered. For what it's worth, you know, those cities that host a transfer station actually have an opportunity for lower costs of their garbage service, because a majority of the garbage service is typically the cost of hauling that takes place between, in this case, Waste Management and others, and they have a shorter haul route, and that's a benefit. In this case, if Woodinville were selected, there's actually a financial benefit potentially to those near that station. And conversely, a disadvantage to those further away, say in Kirkland. So, but that's true no matter where we locate, right? So we're aware of those types of considerations, but there's not any direct mitigation that is available to address it. We do, by identifying the parcels here in Woodinville and the existing location, we have established that these locations, these alternatives, are within a serviceable and reasonable distance. And certainly one could argue that if that were the only factor, you know, one might have a greater advantage over another, right? But it's certainly something that we consider. In terms of sites that have scored higher, and where are they, and you know, why aren't they on the list? This has been an iterative process. You know, we started with over 70,000 parcels. By the time it got to the Siting Advisory Committee, I think it was over 100 parcels that were being evaluated. And we've gone through a couple of times looking at the analysis, have even benefited from independent review from the cities working by themselves to look at our process, to look at the ratings of the alternatives. But, you know, the parcels that we have identified, including up until just a few weeks ago, the Houghton Park and Ride, showed, when looking at the criteria, looking at the project objectives, these were the best sites available. And the fact that we are now down to 2 is, I recognize for this community, it feels like your probability of siting just increased, and technically it did, right? If you just look at it from, wow, there was 2 alternatives in Kirkland and only 1 in Woodinville. I understand the math, but the reality is we're trying to get to 1. We need to narrow the scope, but we need to do so with properties that we really believe can meet the project objectives, serve the regional needs, and we're confident that based on the criteria that's been established, based on the very careful analysis that's taken place, as well as the work that's ahead, and there's a lot of work ahead, particularly through this environmental review we're about to go through, we will land with the right decision, and we'll be able to explain that and stand by that right decision for whatever community becomes that host city, and work with that community for appropriate mitigations. And I have to be honest with you, Mayor, I don't know what I didn't answer for you. I'm not sure either. So. Good. And I don't know if my staff want to add to any of that, but thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have Rosa Antoine, if I'm saying that right.
Yes.
Thank you.
You are. I'm new to Woodinville. Basically, I've lived here less than 2 years. And so I'm very interested in everything that's going on with changes. And now that I have a map to look at and I see where the spot is, well, I drive down that road to go down to the wine places. And there's quite a bit of traffic already. And I'm thinking, big old trucks going down that little narrow road, are they going to make it any bigger? First question. The second is kind of like, what was the sell point? Or was there a sell point that made you all interested in having this in Woodinville? Looks like it's a nice thing. You know, they've taken a lot of things into consideration. It won't be the dump that I was used to in San Jose. So anyway, but I'm just wondering what appealed to the powers that be of the city of Woodinville, and what's the benefit to me as a citizen here? What do I get out of this? Thank you.
Mary's going to let me talk about the benefits. That's very nice of Mary. I'm going to have to buy her a coffee tomorrow. You know, the benefits to the community as a whole, one of them I mentioned is that an opportunity for lower costs of service by your hauler. It's not a guarantee because your city manages that, but okay. All right, I'll let me move on. I'll move on from that. Has it ever happened? It has. Yes, it does. And I would say just the convenience. You know, the convenience of being able to. Most of you probably use a transfer station now, right? And it's a good thing to have access to, right? Okay. All right. Our customers seem pretty happy when they get to our facilities. And so just having access, in this case, to expanded recycling. Right now, we don't offer the level of recycling that really should be available to your community. We have a very limited amount of recycling available. We also have a very limited ability to handle the traffic. So at our current station, there's increased risks for off-site queuing because we don't have a lot of room to handle the traffic. And in a modern station, right, we can mitigate that. And so I would just say that, you know, you get access to a modern facility with expanded services would be probably one of the biggest benefits. No, I didn't. I just got to do the benefits, and by the reaction, I got a lukewarm. I'm betting she's going to crush it.
Hi, this is Mary with King County. So speaking more specifically to the transportation mitigation, the answer is I don't know if the road would get widened. That's going to depend on what the traffic study says. Once we look at the traffic counts, look at projections for the next 20 to 30 years, would widening the road make sense? Could we add pedestrian safety with that? You know, because there's a lot of people that walk and ride their bikes here in the Woodinville area. You know, would part of the transportation mitigation be additional pedestrian or bicycle facilities in addition to widening the road? Pat mentioned it a little bit, but due to the layout of the existing Houghton transfer station, we don't have the lanes there to do on-site queuing. So on-site queuing means we would have additional lanes actually on the transfer station site so that you wouldn't get trucks and other haulers stacked out in the street. They would actually line up on the transfer station site.
So just as a reminder, if we can hold our questions to it's our turn so we can be speaking into the microphone. In this case, the question that was asked from the audience is about traffic counters on the roads.
Yeah, so this is Mary from King County again, just to get into a little bit about what a traffic analysis actually is. So roads and intersections, this might be a little bit more detailed than anybody wants, but roads and intersections are graded from A to F. A is the best, F is the worst. There's some very complex equation that I learned in college years ago, and I don't remember now because we have computer programs to do it, that assumes if there's a certain volume of traffic, then they'll calculate how long does it take the last car in line in that backed up traffic to get through the light. Can they get through the light in one cycle? Does it take 3 cycles? And then depending on how long it takes a car to get through a light, through an intersection, how much roads stack up, then it's either A, which, yep, this intersection is doing awesome, or it's an F, which means this intersection is not doing great, it's failing, which means people are waiting several cycles. So some of the local lights, some people have mentioned that you wait for a couple cycles. So part of the traffic analysis is looking at, okay, what's our existing traffic volume added to how much volume would the station add? Let's project it out 20 years, and then look at all of those intersections and roadways and see where they're at on that A to F scale. Depending on where they fall, is it something that can be mitigated? Is it something that if you add a lane, would that improve the A to F grade? If you add, not saying to do this in Woodinville, if you add a traffic light, would that improve things? Here, putting in a new overpass. So there's all different types of ways that traffic engineers look at the data and look at what it's going to be in 20 years and look to see how they can improve the intersections or the roads.
This is Caitlin with the county. I just wanted one other benefit we believe is a benefit that I wanted to point out, and it's really a key difference for us in terms of operations between our older stations, which is what you see now for Houghton versus what you would see with a new station that's developed and which we have with our newer stations, are compactors. One of you had mentioned the number of trucks, the volume of trucks that come into the station within an hour. And that's something that you see an increased number of at the older stations because it's simply transferring garbage from a garbage collection truck to a garbage truck that then drives to Cedar Hills Regional Landfill. The benefit that we see with our newer stations is because we're able to design the facilities to allow for compaction, is that when the items are dropped off, either by a resident who drops something off or a hauler who comes and tips on our floor, is then it's loaded into a compactor. And that significantly reduces the number of trucks that then have to come to the facility, take what's there to the hill. So I think it's a benefit that we see at our newer stations.
All right, everybody, this is Kevin from the city again. So we just passed 7:30, which is the time we advertised for this meeting to end. I know that there's still a lot of questions, but again, I would just like to remind everybody, try to be as succinct as possible. If your question's already been answered, then please, if we can move on to the next person. Also, all of us, whether King County or city staff, we're available. We can hang out afterwards, answer any questions, have any conversations. We will also be putting our information in the chat box, as well as have, I think, some business cards and information at the table for those in person. So this conversation is not stopping tonight. This is an important item for the city, and we want to hear from you, and we want to get you all the information you need so that you know what's going on and so that you're informed. So with that being said, we'll keep on working down our list. Next up I have is Rick Chatterton.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here this evening. Rick Chatterton. I'm a board member with the Woodinville Chamber. I'm also the president of the Woodinville Heritage Society. My husband and I live within a mile of the proposed dump site. My neighbors live within a mile of the dump site. My friends live within a mile of the dump site. We are very concerned that we're probably number one, because who's the second? Pat, can you tell me who the other location might be?
Kirkland. The existing location. The existing location, yes.
Okay. It was very nice of Ms. Harris to discuss or bring up that there's a potential loss of $200 million to the county revenue stream. What all of us in this room have in common with the other 13,000 people that live here in the city of Woodinville is that we all pay taxes. And last month, I think we all got our tax bill, and it's significant. And with the building of this dump, what is the county going to do to mitigate the loss in revenue of $200 million potentially annually of our businesses and our wine distributors? And then the loss in potential revenue from our tax dollars going down, because the value of our property will drop. So that's my first question, is what will the county do to mitigate that? And then the second question has to do with Houghton. You mentioned, Pat, that you want to be good stewards of fiscally responsible stewards. Well, you already own that property. So what would it take to improve that property, and why at the beginning of the meeting it was said that it couldn't be improved? So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. The first part of your question around mitigation to business loss, as I had mentioned earlier, any sort of financial mitigation would be limited to those businesses that were directly displaced, and not extend beyond that. In terms of why not just redevelop the property where it's at? That is a really good and valid question, and why the existing location is still on the list, because we do see that as well as a viable alternative.
Okay, next up we have Gary Harris.
My name is Gary Harris. I live in Woodinville. I'm a property owner, a business owner. I'm the former mayor of Woodinville. Some of my questions have already been addressed. However, I would like to speak more about the cost of doing business. As far as I'm concerned, to put this site in Woodinville is an irresponsible business decision, an absolutely stupid decision, if you want my uncut version. In order to bring this to Woodinville, you're going to have to hire more drivers, or have them work overtime, have them work 6 days a week. Your cost of fuel is going to be more expensive because you are further away from the centroid of your service area. All of these costs are going to increase. One of the first things you said was the cost of doing business is passed on to the customers. So all of us, our rates are going to increase dramatically because you make the wrong decision. So I don't know how I can say that more clearly and have you understand how upset all of us in this room are, and all the people listening, and the people that, well, Now, I've been writing letters for maybe a year and a half or so when I was on city council, and I attended the Zoom meetings. I testified at the in-person meetings and the Zoom meetings, and the points that other people have made about loss of tax revenue for the city of Woodinville is very substantial. Now, this is not just oh gosh, it'll be a little inconvenient for you. Our roads can't handle the traffic. There's going to be significant mitigation. May I dare to say numerous lawsuits regarding you being able to bring these trucks around these roundabouts, 50 trucks an hour or whatever, that our streets can't handle that. It's going to be significant mitigation on that. And that's going to be on you. I mean, if I were doing, in my business, I have to understand what is my income, what are my expenses, how do I stay afloat, and to just say, well, gee whiz, we'll just build this site and raise the rates to cover the cost, that's irresponsible. Absolutely irresponsible.
Excuse me, Mr. Harris.
Okay, I have one question, one more question.
Thank you.
And I'll sit down. The current site is, I believe, 20 acres, thereabouts. The Woodinville site is something like 12 acres. The comment has been made that, well, we don't have room at the current site. The current site is roughly twice as large as the Woodinville site. Plus, the Woodinville site, about 40% of it is wetlands. You're not going to be able to build on it. So you have a very small area, and you're going to put this much larger, up-to-date facility on it. I don't think that's going to work. Thank you.
Next up, we have Scott Maston. Martin, apologize.
Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight. I can't say much more than has already been said. I guess my comment or my question is rodent mitigation. I live about 1,000 yards from the current Cascade Waste Management Facility, and they're currently undergoing some construction. And I've seen an increased presence of rodents in that area because I go down periodically. And at the Houghton site, on I think my most recent visit, I did see about a 12, 14-ounce Norway rat just crawl across the floor and jump into one of the tubs there to his demise or her demise. It just seems to me that there's going to be an increased prevalence in disease, vermin, and whatnot, and I'm sure there's a lot of mitigation that goes on. But I've got a pet. We have pets in our neighborhood, and we're already kind of seeing some presence from the current activity that goes on with waste management. I think there's going to be an increase, and maybe you can just speak to some of what goes on in that realm to reduce potential infestation. Thank you.
Are you taking comments from people on the phone?
At this point, we're asking that you put it in the comment box, but we can come to you next if you'd prefer.
Great, I'll be next. I just want to make the announcement to everybody in the room that there was no link to the invite that was sent out to our entire community, and there was no option for people to join this call tonight. And a second invite was sent out with a link that actually did work, immediately followed by a cancellation. So I want you all to realize there's not fair representation from our community on this call tonight.
Thank you for that comment. We've noted it. We will be looking into what happened. We've also been recording this conversation. We posted online, as well as the PowerPoint and all the information. And as I've mentioned, city staff and as county staff has mentioned, we are here at your disposal. If you have questions, you have comments, we'd love to have conversations with everybody. And if you know someone who wasn't able to make it tonight, please feel free to share our information. That's what we're here for. So I appreciate that feedback. Thank you. Next up, we have, I apologize.
Yeah, hi, this is Annie from King County, and I wanted to talk about the rodent issue. So one of the key differences between the new Northeast Recycling and Transfer Station and some of the older stations or older facilities is that it will be an enclosed facility. It will not be fully open. That minimizes the potential for vectors like rodents to get into the stations. And then also our goal is to be moving the garbage out quickly and having compaction equipment in, just getting it out of the station so that it doesn't stay there. And then going back to our RePlus program, our whole goal is to minimize the amount of garbage that we're putting into the landfill, that we're taking to the transfer stations, finding better uses for it. That is also another way that we can reduce the potential for rodents and other vermin on the site.
Thank you. Next up, we have Rose Merle Spunder.
Hi, I'm Rose Merle Spunder, and I'm a resident of Woodinville. I'm going to be up the hill from the proposed site, which is not very appetizing. I have two simple questions. First question is, when this initially all started, the point system, Woodinville came in at around 38 and Houghton came in at around 75. So my question is, why is Woodinville even on the list?
This is Mary with King County. So we, as Pat mentioned earlier, we started with over 70,000 potential parcels. We narrowed that down to around 200 that then we went through a process called broad area site screening. And part of that was a scoring process. But the scoring was not the only factor we took into account. It was one of the items that informed our decision to narrow down the list.
That wasn't made clear, though. I mean, also the sneaky business about adding extra parcels to Woodinville last minute, which wasn't part of the initial however many thousands of sites, that was, to me, extremely fishy.
And this is Mary from King County again. This is Mary from King County again. I'm sorry that it wasn't clear. We definitely could have done a better job in communicating, and we didn't do a good job in communicating that. So those parcels actually were included in the original 70,000. So we did, as Pat mentioned earlier, it's an iterative process and it's a complicated process trying to find a location for an essential public facility, especially in an area up here. I was driving around, Bothell, Kirkland area the other day, and empty pieces of property, even here in Woodinville, that I never would have thought would have had construction on them are now being built on. It seems like any open land is, getting built on. So that really limits where we can put something. So when we went through and did the analysis, first we looked for any parcels that were 8 to 20 acres. And we went through the process and looked at that. And then we started thinking, well, what if there are clusters of parcels? So then we looked at parcels that were from 2 acres to 8 acres and see if we clustered those together, could we come up with, a little bit bigger parcel. During the siting process, we made the decision just to focus on about 18 to 20 of those parcel clusters that were closer to the centroid of our study area. After that siting advisory group meeting in April, when the siting advisory group member brought up the parcels that are now on our list, when we went back and looked at the original list of the parcel clusters, because there were about 96 of them, it was in that group that we initially hadn't reviewed. So then to make sure that we hadn't missed any other potential sites, we went back and re-reviewed that entire list of 96 cluster parcels. So it's a little bit confusing, but.
But as you said, it wasn't clearly given out as proper information, so it did sound very sneaky. Yeah. My other question is, do you realize that the Chrysalis School across the road is a special needs school? And will that be taken into consideration for a decision?
So I can tell you that the information about there being a school across the street was shared during the scoping period, initial scoping period. I can imagine it probably will be shared again during the next scoping period that we have coming up, and it's something that was added to the review for the team to look at in analysis for the EIS.
All right, so it will be looked at? Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, thank you.
Can you, so for those online, we have someone from Chrysalis School who wants to provide a little more context to, I think, some of the comments from this previous.
Just real quick, I was next on the list, I think, I don't know, but my name is Zach Fogel with Chrysalis School. My family has owned Chrysalis School for the past 40 years in Woodinville. We've been at the site that is directly across the street from the new proposed center. And one thing about our school that is unique is that we don't offer transportation to our students, so they drive themselves. So we have anywhere from 100 to 150 kids drive themselves to school that are of 16 to 18 years old, that are new drivers in and out of our parking lot all day long. Our schedules are not a standard 8 to 4. You know, our schedules stagger all day long. No student has the same schedule. They come from, some start at 9, some start at 1, some start at 2, some start at 3. They come and go all day long. Also, one quick question. There was two King County staff that were out yesterday or the day before taking photos and measurements, maybe part of a study program. They had mentioned that one of their criteria or one of their possible negatives for that site was being within 1,000 feet of a school. And we just measured it today, and we're actually 92 feet away from the proposed site. And our exit to our school is actually probably 15 feet from the site. So, thank you.
If I may, I just want to repeat something that Mr. Fogel said before he was up to the mic for the sake of those online, and if you can confirm, you said that Chrysalis School is not a special needs
That is
school?
correct, yeah.
Okay.
Well, we're not classified as special needs. We do have students with certain diagnoses, but it's not our entire clientele, correct?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that point of clarification. Okay, so at this point, it's 8 minutes until 8 o'clock. So we have 4 more people that are signed up to speak. We are going to try to go through those last 4, but if we do not get to you, everybody in those last 8 minutes, us from city staff will be here after this meeting as long as possible, as long as necessary, to answer any additional questions. So please don't feel like we are not listening. It's just, this has been a long night, and we're trying to do our best here. So with that being said, next up we have is Steve Yarbrough.
Good evening. I'm Steve Yarbrough. I'm a resident of the City of Woodinville. This is a decision that you all are struggling with. We're struggling with from the standpoint of, is it credible? Does it make sense? So my question to you is, specifically, what are the metrics you are going to use to make this decision? How will they be weighted? Or is this going to be something that's going to be subjective, like the flip of the coin? And when will we find out the results of the metrics you were using and what the scores were? Thank you.
This is Mary from King County. Pat mentioned this earlier, so there's several different things that we're taking into account when we make our decision on the final location for this facility. We don't have a weighting system. The different things we take into account is the environmental impact statement, so the technical analysis and the EIS that we're doing over the next 8 to 12 months. We'll also take a look at the economic analysis and cost factors. We're also going to take a look at our equity impact report. So all of those will inform the decision around where the final site location will be. And right now our current schedule says that we'll be making that final decision summer of 2024.
Will you share those results?
Yes, this is Mary from King County again. And the question was if we'll share those results. And yes, we will be sharing those results. We'll, Kaylin mentioned earlier that signing up for our project newsletter on our website, that's a great way to stay in the know. We'll also release press releases. We'll notify our city, our partners with the City of Woodinville, so, yeah.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jane Milan. Thank you, sorry.
I'm Jane Millar. I'm a resident of Woodinville. I'm a little late because I was trying to get online and was not successful. And you probably already answered my question, but the idea of those trucks going through our roundabouts is just kind of a nightmare to me. You've talked about the ones on 202, but coming from the other direction, is that part of the plan?
So a traffic study is part of the plan, so that we can understand those very dynamics before we make a decision. Part of the environmental impact statement, which is a study we're about to embark on, will include assessing traffic impacts, amongst other things, and then determine whether or not those impacts can be mitigated. So it is part of the planned study.
I'm sorry to hear that, but thank you.
Thank you. Next up we have is Alex Campbell.
Hi, I'm Alex Campbell, resident of Woodinville. Actually, bringing us back to the site, the Houghton Park and Ride that was removed. As has been mentioned multiple times tonight, this is a essential public facility. It can be sited anywhere. You can do eminent domain to take any land. If you've lost some north side of the site acreage, there's homes, hate to say it, but they can be relocated probably easier than relocating a business. Why are you not looking at continuing to keep that site and just expand it south?
One of the early decisions we made in terms of criteria is that we were not going to consider residential properties and exercise eminent domain over them. The question was, and this is Pat, by the way, from Solid Waste. The question was relative to the fact that we were not going to, from an early decision, consider residential properties, but yes, we were going to consider existing business properties as a potential location.
All right, last question. Angie West.
I'm Angie West, and I'm actually located right on top of the hill where you guys are looking at the property. My question is to you, Mary. You mentioned that you're doing the traffic study. I know I brought it up on the Zoom call, but I wasn't clear on the answer, if I received an answer. But you've mentioned you're going to look at the traffic over 20 years. but have you taken into account the new hotel that's going in, the 89-plus homes at the top of the hill, the Mulbeck's project? Is that part of the 20 years, or are you working with the numbers you have today?
This is Mary with King County Solid Waste. From what I understand, we would take all available traffic data because, as you mentioned, there's a lot of different developments going on in Woodinville right now. There's the homes up on the hill. There's the was it East Rail Flats that just broke ground. That's going to be apartment homes and townhomes right off of 175th. So ideally, we'll be able to find any traffic impact studies from all of those projects so that we can make sure and combine that with any of our projected traffic. Because really, we have to look at what is the projected traffic in 20 years, and also acknowledging it's not just our traffic. There's a lot of development going on in the city of Woodinville right now. And those intersections at like the rail trestle and going over the bridge over by the used to be McCory's on the Slough. I don't remember what the new restaurant is. But all of the cut shop, yeah. So all of those we have to look at, given all the development plus our traffic, what's this going to look like with growth projections in 20 years? And then what will the impacts to those intersections be?
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if you had the joy of being able to travel down these main streets at 11 o'clock in the morning to about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You're waiting more than one stoplight. I dread it if I have to come down here for lunch, and I love my town, but it's getting worse and worse the more building that's happening here. And one of them that becomes an issue is there by McClendon's, where you can have 1.5 cars turning left into McClendon's. So if we have trucks coming in off the freeway, we have people trying to go into McClendon's and whatever business are back there, plus people getting to the freeway to get on to 405 interchange. That, I don't see how that's going to work if you're talking 15 trucks an hour. So I just wanted to bring that up, and I think it's important to not just look at the traffic today and work from that, but also to look at the growth that we have in this city. Thank you.
All right, so that concludes all the question and answer part of tonight. We made it. It's 8 o'clock exactly. So thank you for those of you who hung around for the whole show. We want to say thank you to everybody who attended from the community. All of your questions are great. We hear you. There will be considered, and we as the city are doing everything we can to represent your interests and make sure that the correct decision is made. At the same time, we really appreciate and want to thank King County for coming. This is not an easy position we put them in, to put them in the hot seat and answer all these questions. So thank you, Pat. Thank you, Mary, Kaylin, Annie. We really appreciate your partnership, and we're looking forward to working with you more as we continue to hopefully site this transfer station in Houghton.